Hello, this presentation will be on wedding customs in China, specifically a comparison of Mao era and modern customs. This presentation is by Deshana Garrett and Anna Victoria Valles, who will take over halfway through the presentation to give her side of the presentation. First, we're going to define modern China, and the modern China referenced in this presentation really just refers to China post-1980s. During this time, there's an influx in experimental ideas and inspiration. This is like right after Mao era. He's just died. So there's a huge expansion, in the Chinese arts in the 1990s. And China has a economic reform that is wildly successful and leads into what we know China's economy to be today. So Mao era China is referring to the China that lasted from the founding of the People's Republic of China on October 1st, 1949 to December 22nd, 1978. And it's really here that we have this big shift from traditional Chinese culture due to Mao coming into power. So marriage in the societal view in the Mao era and the modern era are really different. During the Mao era, the first few years after the party came into power, they were directly involved in many aspects of marriage and in family, and lots of pre-communist practices were banned. So minor marriage was banned, concubinage was banned. Mao just was very progressive. There's also less emphasis allowed from parents to choose who their children married. In the modern view, as time has gone on, especially among the younger generation, marriage has become a lot less popular, likely due to the rising cost of families. Typically, one person is taking care of their parents and their grandparents. One child is taking care of a lot of their entire families due to the one-child policy. So getting married later or really late in life has become more normalized throughout the years. In the Mao era, bride price, also known as the dowry, was formally eliminated. And it was replaced with something else that we'll talk about for the modern era. But another thing, parental control, as I mentioned before, of the choice of their partner, of their children's partner, is lessened, and marriage became a concept more ingrained towards love, but there was also still a business aspect. Everyone wanted a son to continue their bloodline. In the modern era, as the bride price of the dowry was formally eliminated, something else really took its place. And it's the exchanging of gifts between families. It's really similar, but also not, because it's not gender-based. Both parties get gifts, both the husband or the wife, or both people getting married get gifts. Like the Mao era, parental control of marriage partner choice is still not really allowed. However, the weight of the parents and the elders' words and opinions hold a lot of value. China is a very elders, hierarchical country. So here's a quick video that you can watch.
整个大环境促使现在的婚礼行业不是非常景气，这个也是客观事实。包括我们中国的整个这个结婚的率下降他们的整个的形式的变化，自己概念变化，这个对今后年轻一批的婚礼来说是一个比较大的考验。我可能是蛮希望再度有一个比较大的一个高潮起来的，但现在感觉担忧大于一些看好的前景吧。
as a market, we see an absolute downturn in spending. So all alongside, our strategy have been niche, 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 niche.
I think the reality right now is a lot of younger adults in China feel that raising kids is just too expensive, and they don't think the government has done enough to make having children more affordable, and that's also, I think, having a bit of a drag on the marriage industry as well.
So as you can see, a lot of that information that you just saw in that video is like very recent from this year. But wedding attire in Mao era was also different. The white dress is really when it comes into fashion, they really stray from the traditional Chinese wedding attire. So for less wealthy people, it was really plain, simple. People didn't really have weddings. The white dress was typically for wealthier people, and the less wealthy people, the commoners, would just wear regular clothes. They just got wedding certificates, marriage certificates, and they moved on. There was no gown or ceremony, really big ceremony or flowers or anything. For modern, it's really common for brides to wear red, especially qipaos and a veil. White dresses are also really common, though have been on a small decline recently. But red is a really common color because it represents happiness, luck, and prosperity. But guests are not supposed to wear red, and it's common for the bride and the husband to have multiple outfit changes. So here's like a traditional, what it looks like now, modern outfit that people wear, that brides wear in weddings. Wedding guests. For the Mao era, weddings were really simple. Most people were commoners, not wealthy, so they didn't really bring gifts, and it was just friends and families and sometimes neighbors. Now, typically, there's a lot of guests, at least 100. Sometimes larger weddings have more than 100, several hundreds. Many people will show up, close family and friends, extended family might come in, and guests are seated at like round tables. In regards to venues during the Mao era, most weddings were held at the local government office, and they weren't really like grand. Most of the time, there were no big celebrations unless you were wealthy, because people had to go to work the next day. And this is when like Mao's, like this is during the Great Famine, stuff like that. So during modern era, weddings are really grand. Typically, the groom's family pays for most of the wedding, which I actually found very interesting. They also pay for the banquet. Usually the actual ceremony takes place in a city hall, and there's a private celebration reception held later. And there's different practices too. So during the Mao era, couples would go to a local government office, bow their heads to a portrait of Mao Zedong while holding a book of quotations from Chairman Mao. And they would like sing and joke and have fun in a cheap, like a less expensive way, an inexpensive way. And only one witness is required. During the modern era, though, the betrothal is a custom. There's an exchange of gifts from both sides, different from a dowry. There's a tea ceremony, which is really well known, when the couple receives money in an envelope, and they'll bow to their parents and gives tea to their parents, who will drink from it. There's also a vow exchange, and vows to each other are customary. Here's just some photos of weddings during the Mao era. You can see Mao in the background in the photo, and people standing in front of them in the marriage certificates, people getting the marriage certificates here. So I'm going to pass this off to Anna Victoria to give you guys a decade breakdown, and thank you so much.
The 1950s. Mao famously said, 妇女能顶半边天, women can hold up half the sky. On May 1950, Mao announced the 1950 marriage law. It thought to bring an end to the influences of the patriarchy and ageism that existed in the feudal family system. It broke down barriers such as social class and upheld age limits. These changes, according to Mao, brought freedom to women in the Chinese society and allowed them to enhance their productivity. It also gave women legal equality with men. In the 1950s, getting a marriage certificate was enough to consider yourself married. I read an anecdote from an elder female resident from Hubei province that went on to say that the marriage certificate was not much more than a paper with an official seal on it, and that some people did not buy special clothes or gifts for the occasion. A simple gathering with some friends, neighbors, or family was enough. She said, although the wedding was very simple, it was in fact very meaningful. We had the certificate framed. The 1960s. Like the 50s, but heavily influenced by the Cultural Revolution. There would be no flowers and no gown. Couples would get married by bowing their heads to a portrait Mao Zedong at the local government office and hold the little red book in their hands. In this decade, free love became the norm and was accepted in most parts of China. For a wedding, friends would gather for some peanuts, sweets, and tea. No big celebrations were held, though, because people had work the next day. And it would cost a whole month's worth of wages to buy some candies, tea, and cigarettes for these events. The 1970s. Getting married became more connected to material possessions and a dowry in this decade. San Da Jian. 3 essential items became a popular thing when getting married, and those items included a watch, bicycle, and a sewing machine. Later added to the list would be a radio. Household furniture also became popular. Newlyweds were expected to own at least one complete set of furniture, including a table, 4 chairs, a bed, a writing desk, a couch, a coffee table, etc. Wedding ceremonies were still be relatively simple. There was a marriage certificate, and when the couple would face a portrait of Mao Zedong and have at least one witness present. Some accounts during this decade was a man from Shanghai in 73. He did not even inform his closest relatives of the match. And the second account was a man who married in 1974. He said the neighborhood committee would come to ask what kind of marriage we would have. If they thought it was too luxurious, they would educate us to make it simple. One of my best friends gave me 40 renminbi. That was all her salary for a month. The 1980s. The second marriage law of 1980 was implemented. It made it easier to get a divorce and reinforced the one-child policy. During divorces, this law helped give favor to women and children in property distribution. It was updated in 1983 and formalized legal procedures for marriages between Chinese citizens and foreign nationals. General necessities for weddings were household electric appliances. The 3 main items of the time were TV set, washing machine, and fridge. However, not all people can afford them. Having Mao's portrait present while taking her vows was slowly disappearing as well. Weddings became more formal again. Having Western-style dress and plastic flowers were very popular, and locations would be out of home, such as hotels and restaurants. It became popular to pick up the bride as a group on bikes. Color wedding photos also emerged at this time. During this time and in the 90s, it was popular for the bride to light a cigarette for every man attending the wedding banquet as a token of gratitude. Then she would join her groom in a series of funny smoking games for good luck. A Shanghai native who got married in 1982 said her gifts included pillows, a dress, and a spittoon, but what she wanted to get most was quilts. Because she noted, because in 1982, the more quilts you had, the more limelight you got. The 90s. The cost of a wedding was 10 times more in this decade than it was in the 80s. This is due to younger couples that married in this era being children of the one-child policy. So grandparents and parents were willing to spend a lot of money to launch their child on the bridal path. The 3 must-have electronics were a motorbike, air conditioning, and video recorder. Owning a house also became important, but not a possibility for many. Bride dowries started to play a major role as well. On the day of the wedding, the groom's side would rent a car to pick up the bride. The practice of getting pre-wedding pictures also became popular. All wedding photos were in color in the 90s, and the Communist Party newspapers would critique the expenses of weddings in this decade by saying, "Is it necessary for ordinary people to spend luxuriously on marriage?" They also banned senior officials from making extra money from leasing their imported cars to wedding parties. 2000s to present day. In 2001, the second marriage law was modified to outlaw married persons' cohabitation with a third party. This restricted the resurgence of concubinage in big cities. Bride prices also reached a new height due to the shortage of women, especially in rural areas. 2000s to present day. In 2001, the second marriage law was modified to outlaw married persons' cohabitation with a third party. This restricted the resurgence of concubinage in big cities. Bride prices also reached a new height due to the shortage of women, especially in rural areas. A man needs to own his own car and is expected to buy a house in order to be considered eligible to get married. Weddings consist of a combination of Western and traditional styles with an emphasis on individuality and have a classy, original, and expensive aesthetic. Pre-wedding photos became essential to wedding practices as well, and they're more artistic and many taken outside studios and or abroad. And here are our sources. Thank you so much for listening.